Before that, though, I want to talk about the very latest situation in Ukraine, concerns about how to get the grain out of Ukraine, whether there can be a corridor in the Black Sea where there's going to be safe passage for the grain to get out of Ukraine. If that doesn't happen, there is significant concerns about people in Africa and also Asia who may well starve. Let's speak to General Richard Barrons, former commander of Joint Forces Command. Hello to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us this morning. How big a worry is it about this grain corridor, whether or not it happens?
It's a major worry. It's one of the most damaging effects of this war is that the grain that Ukraine normally supplies to Africa, Asia and elsewhere is not getting out by sea. And there's so much of it that if you try to move it by rail, it takes 2 years to get 1 year's crop out. So in order to contain the effects of this war, one way or another, that grain has to get out.
More than 100 days since this war first began. How much longer can it last?
Well, there's no script and there's no rule that says a war like this with a front line that's 1,000 miles long is going to be quick. It may have pauses, and we may see in the Donetsk in a couple of weeks, if the Russians feel that they've got as far as they want to go or have simply run out of steam, that there is a pause. But that does not mean that the fight is over, and we should expect this war to continue well into next year, even if it comes and goes a bit.
OK, Russian Defence Minister saying that Russia has now liberated 97% of the Luhansk region. First of all, do you think that can be true? And secondly, if that is the case, does that then lend itself to the argument that you just put forward, which means that there could be a pause?
So I think we're at a very telling point now. Russia occupies about 20% of Ukraine and 97% of Luhansk and close on at least 85% of the Donbas region as a whole. And the absolute key question is when Russia feels that it has gone as far in the Donbas as it needs to go, and it is fighting this brutal, grinding battle, expending vast amounts of ammunition and casualties to get there. Has it run out of steam, or does it simply decide to pause before coming back elsewhere this year? And we won't know the answer to that for some time. On balance, it looks like in the Donbas, they're running out of steam.
Why is the Russian invasion having such an impact on global resources?
Well, I think we're looking at the combined effects of the isolation of Russia and the sanctions regime that's applied to Russian energy, and then the effects on global food markets, particularly grain, as a result of the blockade on Ukraine, and indeed the difficulty in getting grain out of Russia. And we need to recognize that in a world of globalized supply chains, any big war between big countries is going to ripple across the world in this sort of way. And the fact is we're going to have to manage the consequences of this if we're going to do the right thing by Ukraine.
OK. We've been hearing from Zelensky. He does his nightly address, doesn't he, to the Ukrainian people. And very many Ukrainians have also tried to flee the country. Even if there was a pause now, how long do you think it would take to start to rebuild that country of Ukraine and for people to start to return there?
So I think we should be clear that there's a pause as a result of perhaps Russia deciding to stop or run out of steam is not a pause in any way for Ukraine. Ukraine will want to build the military capability that it needs to go on the offensive and take its country back. And whether that's this year, later on, or more likely next year, that's the thing that will be in our laps next. That process of rebuilding the Ukrainian military to throw the Russians out is at least a year's work and will cost a lot of money and a lot of effort from the West. But that's the demand that's going to come.
How wise is it to provide weapons that could be used, although the Ukrainians have said that they won't, could be used to fire into Russia?
I think with the war at the stage it's now in, so well developed in Ukraine, quite a lot of this is priced in by all sides. I think what would make a difference clearly would be if Western delivered weapons with long range, typically 150 to 300 kilometers, was actually used by Ukraine to fire into Russia. That, I think, would change the way Russia approaches this. But the current understanding that Ukraine is given weapons that give it the long range it needs to destroy Russian artillery before it destroys them, but does not fire into Russia, I think that's a place that most people will essentially live with.
OK, it's good to talk to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Thank you.